What's going on, guys? It's Mike from BavhausTV, and today in the shop we have a single turbo N54. This car is back at the shop because it's running into some camshaft faults as well as some VANOS faults, and we're going to show you guys how to diagnose and repair what we think is going to end up being a hook ring failure on either one or both of the camshaft bearing ledges. So this car has an intermittent issue where pretty much every time I have it, it runs completely fine, and then the owner gets it back. It immediately goes into boost cutoff and limp mode. The bigger thing that we're seeing is that all of the codes are related to camshaft position or camshaft being stuck or VANOS, and they tend to hop around. They're never the same code regardless of how many times you clear the codes and then wait for them to come back. It's never really consistent. So I've seen them on the exhaust cam, he's seen them on the intake cam, and they kind of just do what they want. So you can see he took it upon himself to do some aftermarket wiring over here to try to solve the issue. When we had it last, it was all neatly wired in. We did already replace the harness and try to mitigate some of the heat from destroying the harness, but one of the things that we're gonna do is reroute the entire harness for the water pump and all of the stuff up here so that it goes around the engine this way. But first we wanna solve the issue of the camshafts having problems. I think the reason he did this was because one of our thoughts was that the turbo was damaging the wires with heat, but I think after doing this, he realized that's not the case. So being that it's an early 08 N54, this car does fit into the engines that did not get the upgraded Teflon seals, and this more than likely still has the metal bearing seals. So on the floor here, we have some bearing ledges from another N54. And what we want to show you before we get into this is what the hook ring failure looks like. As you can see here, there's this groove that is in these bearing ledges. And this groove, although it looks machined, is not supposed to be there. This is supposed to be a nice polished surface like this over here. But these metal hook rings that sit on the front of the camshafts start wearing in and then screw up the oil pressure that gets delivered to the VANOS solenoids that then supplies the VANOS actuators. So one of the things that we're gonna do while we're in there is actually replace the VANOS actuators. They are known to be a failing point on these engines, and they're really difficult to diagnose without physically taking them apart and finding damage. And at that point, you really can't put them back together. So for the sake of replacing everything all at once and trying to properly get this thing fixed and running right, we are gonna replace the VANOS actuators while we're in there. You guys can choose to do so. We're gonna show you guys how to prime them or keep them primed while they're out of the engine regardless. And if you want to replace yours while you're there, I definitely recommend it since we're just putting in all new parts on the top end. But if not, that's fine too. We'll show you guys what you got to do while you have them out to make sure that they don't cause new faults when you reinstall. Here's a brand new bearing ledge from BMW, and as you can see, those grooves do not exist here. So you can tell now that this issue is caused after the fact and not something that is machined into these from factory. There's a service bulletin about this for, I think, N52s, as well as N55s, some N51s, but primarily N54s get it the worst as they have two bearing ledges. So we're gonna go in the car and diagnose it before we get into it, but we're gonna show you guys what codes are associated with that service bulletin. We'll link the service bulletin below in the description. And then if everything kind of checks out for us to have a reason to go into the engine and start looking into this issue, then we will go ahead and do it. So when I last had the car, I'm pretty sure everything was on the exhaust cam. So now we're seeing boost shut off, we're seeing variable camshaft timing control, intake, cold start, then inlet camshaft reference, inlet camshaft synchronization, VANOS intake. So it seems like there's something serious going on with the VANOS setup on the intake. So at this point, I think the best thing to do, since we have already kind of poked around with the VANOS solenoids as well as the camshaft position sensors, is to pop it open and actually look at what's going on under the valve cover. So I'm going to start by removing all of the stuff back there, as well as the turbocharger, since it's going to be in the way of the valve cover, and the fuel rail, and get to the point where we can remove the valve cover. All right, so we pulled off the entire harness. I took the coil packs out before I disconnected the rail so that the fuel that leaks down wouldn't affect the coil packs. Fuel rail was removed, the cover there, as well as the air filter. Oh, and then we took the heat shield off for the turbo. Some of you guys, if you're not single turbo, won't have that. But yeah, that's pretty much what we're looking at. So next thing I'm gonna do is remove the valve cover. I'm gonna try to sneak it past the turbo. I did disconnect the downpipe because the V-band was kind of in the way, and then this kind of was sitting there. So just to move it over. I'm not sure how we're gonna sneak past over here, but we're gonna give it a shot. So I got the valve cover off and I can immediately see that the intake cam is definitely advanced a bit. We're gonna end up taking out both bearing ledges to at least inspect them, but there's definitely something going on here with either the intake cam phaser or the bearing ledge itself. So just in rotating the motor over to find top dead center, you can see right at the front of the camshaft right there, all that oil leaking out, which means oil pressure is leaking past those hook rings. So this is absolutely a hook ring failure. If you look at the exhaust cam, there's no oil leaking out, and this is actively leaking. I'll turn the motor over a couple times so you can see this. See the leaking? See right there when the oil pressure starts to load up. It's gonna start running out of the back there. There's air bubbles coming through. Oh, I don't know if you saw that air bubble right there. Let's get you guys close up. See the air bubble? Right there again. Oil leaking out now. Oh yeah, look at that. So that's our oil pressure failure right there. So we had to remove the compressor housing and the hot side charge pipe on the car just to get access to the 27mm main tensioner bolt there. We put the cam fixture on, the crank pin is in, and then I like to use the VANOS fixture just to make sure that everything's in alignment. This slightly was out even with this on, so I brought it over a little bit to make it fit. You can relieve the bolts here now, and then you want to release that 27mm, and then that's going to give you enough slack to actually get the VANOS actuators out. So I removed the cam phasers, and I took the ledge cover off of this camshaft, and if you look right here, you can see that this rectangring has like a lip to it, and this one sits nearly flush, and this is the one that was leaking, and probably right out of these little connection points there. So one thing about the phasers is when you take them out, it's best to put them in oil, submerge them in oil until you're ready to reinstall so that they don't get air pockets in them. We're gonna do that with new ones, but if you guys are reusing your old ones, just take them out and put them in nice clean oil. Here's the top of that cover. And you can see there's a large lip here and up here, so not sure if you guys can see how out of spec that is. Look at the grooves. They're cut into this thing. So we're definitely going to go ahead with replacing these with our new ones. All the bolts need to be replaced. When you release this, start on the outside and break them all free, so stagger them in like this. And then just keep doing laps to slowly raise the tension off of the valves, just to not bend the camshaft or snap the camshaft or do any damage. Just have some patience and go around into a circle and keep doing it. All right, so now that we went and kind of cleaned everything up around the rocker rollers, one thing I want to tell you guys to be really mindful of is the type of rocker roller setup that is on these dual overhead cams. And you can just knock these out. Even when you're removing the camshaft ledges themselves, they kind of might fall out, and you have to make sure they sit in place when you go to put the new one in, or you're going to ruin the motor, or at least have one hell of a job to go back and clean up. Again, just make sure that they're all seated in place. They don't clip or anything, they just rest right on top. We're going to go and just put a little bit of assembly lube on all the rolling surfaces, and then we're going to go put the bottom of the ledges down just to put the camshafts back in. So we cleaned up the bearing ledges a bit so we could show you guys what's going on a little bit better. So the intake camshaft clearly has some lips and is definitely valid for replacement. Seems like the intake was leaking worse out of the rear. Like this lip here is huge. And again, you can see where it's kind of squared off from that rectangle digging in. And then this is the exhaust side, which the rear isn't too bad still. You can catch your fingernail. That's usually the judge of how to replace it. But on the exhaust, the front lip is huge. Yeah, these are definitely due for replacement. So we're gonna change the metal hook rings to the Teflon rectangle rings. These are the Teflon rings that replace these metal hook rings. We're gonna get these all swapped up and then just reinstall everything. So we just put some assembly lube on all the rocker rollers and on all of the bearing surfaces. All right, so if you remove your cam phasers, or when you remove your cam phasers, you want to put them into some kind of container, and then you're gonna fill it with oil. So if you look at the back, obviously there's some oil ports, and same thing on the front. And you don't want these to run dry, because when you reinstall them, there's a chance that you can end up with some VANOS faults or camshaft faults, because there's an air pocket somewhere inside. And obviously with gravity, when they're facing up, the air pocket's gonna go up. So we have two brand new phasers here. Again, just preventatively, since we're already in here, we only want to go in here once. The owner of the car suggested we do this, so we said, why not? And we're just gonna put them in this bucket, or this little container, and fill it with oil overnight until we're ready to actually reinstall them, which at that point, we're just gonna take them out and put them on the engine. All right, so once you got them in, get some nice clean oil. It's a brand new jug of liquid moly. And we're just gonna pour it over the entire set of cam phasers here. And you can already see the air bubbles coming out. And yeah, watch them. They'll just keep coming out. Those are the air bubbles that'll screw you over later. And this isn't just for N54, this is for any cam phasers. If you're ever working on cam phasers, you can run into crazy faults, and this is a great way to prevent them. And not a lot of people know about it. So here's the camshaft after we put the new rectangle rings on. These are the cam seals that are made of Teflon. You take out the hook rings, which are these guys, and they're called hook rings because they hook to one another. And these are made of metal, so this is what actually goes into these and starts scoring them. So afterwards, they give you these Teflon ones. So these don't have a hook anymore. These just kind of get stretched over the front of the camshaft and then sit into place. And then they'll kind of return to their position, but just don't overstretch them. Just put them on and kind of guide them in. Make sure they're, you know, positioned properly. You don't have these rolled over or you'll damage them. So we're gonna go and put some assembly lube across this camshaft and then also on the bearing ledge and get this one back in the car. We still have one more camshaft to do right in here, and then we're pretty much done. So we lubricated the camshafts and I put them back into place. Now we're just going to lubricate the top of the bearing ledges and get them into place as well and start installing our bolts. So I actually just put the entire intake camshaft in and then decided to take it back out because I had one observation, and that's actually that I have a bit of a lip here. And that lip does follow all the way back. And it's just the way my particular ledge is casted. So the dowel pins don't really allow, you know, this to move forward or back, but I had to take it out to verify. So just be mindful to check out what yours looks like. Obviously my front is flush, but the entire casting on the side is not. So when installing these, I set the position with the camshaft QR code facing up, and then I just was able to tinker and fine tune it with the bolt up front. So just get it all the way in and then kind of little turn, and then you can kind of control the cam before you tighten it down. And the cam likes to stay in the position it's in when you're pressing it, so it's not something you're going to be fighting with after that. Other than that, what I did is I started in the center and just made contact and then did a quarter turn. And then every time I made contact, did a quarter turn to tighten, I would move out. So to these, and then to there, and to there, and then, you know, all the way out, and then start back in the center. And then move out, and then go back to the center. And again, just contact, quarter turn, contact, quarter turn. And that helps easily bring it down. Other than that, the dowels are pretty fixed, so it's not like this can be too far off. And one thing, if you're using these new ones, these two pieces of the clamshell are milled together. They are a pair. And when they're put together, you can see these milling marks. And if you look at the milling marks and they're off, then you know you did something wrong. But in our situation here, we can see that they were milled evenly. And now with them put back together, they're exactly as they should be. So I'm confident that these are put incorrectly, or this one. I still have to finish up and do the exhaust side, but there really isn't much you can screw up here as long as you just take it nice and slow and put even pressure down. You don't have to use the special tools to do this, but it just requires a little bit more time and a little bit more care. So I still have to torque these to spec, but I'm gonna wait until I get that one down, and then I'm gonna torque them all together. Okay, so we got the ledges fully in. These bolts go in dry. It's very important that you clean out the holes where they actually go, and you make sure that these are dry and clean when they go in. It's not like the head bolts where there's a wet torque spec, and wet and dry torque specs are vastly different. So make sure these are dry on install. The torque spec on it is 8 Newton meters and then 60 degrees. I start in the center and then again go out. You don't want to crisscross these because you don't want to like put this one down and then this one. So do them in pairs. So this one, then this one, and then move your way out. Again, vital to check the inside and make sure all of your lifters are properly on the springs. You can see both of them on the inside. Once you verify that 5 times over, you can go ahead and start reinstalling. So I threw these 2 bolts back in, and then we took our new VANOS actuators out of the oil, put them right on. You kind of need them both half on, and then they go on together. You can't really fully install one and then the other. The pickup wheels are the same for either side. So the VANOS sprockets will say IN and EX. I think right there you can see EX for exhaust, AUS for exhaust in German. And then this will say like in and then EIN, like ein, and that's intake. So the sprockets themselves are different, but the impulse wheels are the exact same. So you can interchange these, it doesn't matter. These bolts need to be replaced. Once you kind of get it all in, you want to put this fixture down. It pins them in the correct position. This fixture holds the camshafts in place. And then down there we have a dummy tensioner. It's like 0.6 Newton meters of tension on this. So what we normally do is just get it finger tight so that I can't spin it anymore with my fingers. And that pre-tensions the chain enough. So at this moment we can go and torque these bolts up and we should be pretty much done. There is 2 filters on the side of the head here. I'm not sure if we're gonna be able to see it. Yeah, right in there, those 2 holes are the filters for the VANOS. While we're here, we have access because it's a single turbo, so we're gonna replace them. So we'll do that in a moment after we bolt this all up. So we just torqued the central bolts. They go 20 Newton meters and then 180 degrees. One more thing I wanna mention, the orientation of these VANOS sprockets does not matter. So intake just has to be on intake, exhaust has to be on exhaust, but where they sit position-wise does not matter. So now that we got this all done, we can take that dummy tensioner out, put the new main tensioner in, swap out those 2 VANOS screens, and we should be all set. These bolts get torqued to 8.5 Newton meters. The 2 VANOS check valves, they go to 15 Newton meters, and then the big main chain tensioner goes to 55 Newton meters. And now we took all the fixtures out, we took the crank pin out, and what we have to do is rotate the motor over a couple times. I just use a stick to find top dead center. So now we're just gonna turn the motor back to top dead center and try to put all the fixtures back on and see if we did everything right. Crank pins back in, the camshaft fixtures back on, and the VANOS fixtures back on. Everything lines up. So we're safe to put it all back together now. So we just got everything fully put back together. One thing we ended up doing was removing all the spark plugs, and we're gonna leave all the injectors unplugged. Whenever you do internal engine service, you want to make sure everything is getting oil properly. And even though we put install lube on all the top end stuff that we worked on, we want some fresh oil there. So we have a jump pack on it. Again, spark plugs out, the injector's disconnected. And what we're gonna do is go prime the engine. So I'm just gonna do 3 sets of cranking. So 10 seconds on and then 20 seconds off just so the starter can cool in between cycles. And after that, we should have decent enough oil pressure in all those top end components that we removed. I might do that entire cycle twice. So 6 key cycles of cranking and 6 cycles of 20 seconds to let the starter rest. But we'll see when we get there. So after finishing up the bearing ledge service and repair on this car, it did get rid of the majority of those VANOS faults, and this thing had every single VANOS or camshaft fault prior to the repair. Afterwards, it still had a few, and what we figured out is that both the VANOS solenoids had actually shat the bed. We'll show you guys what these sound like so you guys can identify a faulty VANOS solenoid. Here we have both sets of VANOS solenoids, and these are the ones that we removed, and these are ones from a donor car just to test. So when we took these out and we put these in, the car started immediately running better and got rid of the majority of the codes. One thing I want to show you guys is they are both original BMW, but if you look, the ones that were in the car, they're like nearly completely flush. Well, these are recessed, so it's a bit of a different design. You can see the color is different too between them. And what we noticed was the sound that the plunger makes when this VANOS actuator is actually activated. You hear how loud and mechanical that is. That's that one. Here's the other one. Very similar. You can kind of hear it pinging. And here are the good ones. Sounds like a plunger, like a suction plunger. These sound like something like metal hitting, and these sound very like nice, clean, quiet. Show you guys the other ones one more time. I'll grab this one. I think this is the worst one. This one sounds like it's almost barely working. And these just sound completely normal. After that, we replaced the VANOS solenoids and the car started to run tremendously better, but it continued to throw an exhaust camshaft installation fault. What we did to remedy that was drive the car around a bit, reset the adaptations, and then it threw a different fault for the exhaust VANOS system. Reset the adaptations and took it for a long drive. And we've put a couple 100 miles on it since, and it's been completely perfect. So even with the camshaft bearing ledge repair, it did need the solenoids and a adaptation reset for the VANOS system to run properly. I think there's some kind of correlation between the VANOS solenoids being overworked by the failure of the hook ring and it digging into the bearing ledge. And as you saw in the beginning of the video, it was bad enough where the oil pressure was significantly leaking out. And I think that causes the VANOS solenoids to kind of be overworked and then more prone to failure than they already are. On top of that, I think the adaptations also were set pretty poorly due to the running condition of this car, including the VANOS solenoids and the bearing ledge failures. So resetting the adaptations just let this thing relearn, and it is just so much fun to drive now. So if this video was helpful, or if you guys have any comments, questions, anything, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. We'll include anything we use that I can think of in the description below. And then if you guys aren't already subscribed to our channel, be sure to subscribe. We are constantly posting content on BMWs. I hope this video helped you guys out. Until next time, thanks for watching BavhausTV.